Captain Peter Cutsey, engine fail en route part 2. We are out of 11,900 feet for 8,000. We are planning to hold over a Booble so that we can take care of quite a few things that we have to do before we can do the approach and the landing. The approaches right now in Muscat are an RMP runway 08 left. So we plan to use a VNAV, LNAV for this approach. We are in an engine out configuration, as you can remember. A quick look at the fuel again. We followed the supplementary procedures with respect to fuel balancing. Very important that you stick with that procedure and not memorize. And the procedure called to balance the main wing tanks first before using the center tank fuel. And that is important, and we're following that procedure. So right now we're still burning fuel from the number 2 main tank. So we'll more than once or twice, we will actually select recall to remind us with the fuel enunciation on the enunciator panel. So that's a good reminder. That recall system works beautifully on the 737. We're going to have a look at, in the plan mode, I brought the first officer's nav display down to the lower DU so that we can actually have a look at the legs page. So here we are here coming up to MCT 36, 8,000 or above, and we're in our descent to 8,000 feet, and we're going to level off at 8,000 feet as per clearance, and we plan to go to Booble and hold at Booble. Inbound 087 right-hand turns as per the inset on the arrival page that we just looked at. So let's have a look at the legs page and see if in fact that we've entered everything correctly. So we have Mike 20 Whiskey Lima is after Booble. All right, so we'll have a look at that, and we'll step through so that we can see that. There it is on the plan mode, and then after the Mike 20 Whiskey Lima comes at ITLAC. So we can see that here on the chart, and it should be at 3,400 feet. Then after that, Mike 07 Whiskey Lima, then the runway 08 left. So we'll look at that by stepping through, and that in fact is what we have, runway 08 left. Then after runway 08 left on the missed approach, we have Mike Sierra 700, which is there, and if you notice, it's on the CN dash line. So then we'll have a look at these. We'll just change the scale, and we'll step through. So step through and have a look at Mike Sierra 705, Mike Sierra 710, as we can see on the chart on our left-hand side, and Mike Sierra 715, as we see on the JEPI chart, and then to MCT, VOR, and hold. So the route as we have put it in is correct and verified. So we're coming up very close to Booble, and we want to set up a hold at Booble. So we'll do that quickly, and remember the holding is already set up on the active route for the missed approach. So we have to go to next hold. I'll have to do it fairly quickly because we're dynamic in the software. I can't stop and go and stop and go. So I'm going to do it fairly quickly, and then we'll review it after we've done it once we're in to the hold. So we set up the at Google, as you can see, had a little problems with the software interacting, so I had to pause. But we used next hold and an inbound of 084, and the holding pattern has been set up with 5 nautical mile length. So we're level at 8,000 feet, and we've slowed to a holding speed recommended on the holding page of 205 knots. And remember, the big thing here is we have to adjust the thrust manually. We don't have on the floor. So we have to keep our eye on the thrust. Also looking at the configuration, fuel configuration, you're right now to let the main tanks pretty relief. Now we'll go up to the page from the center office, from the office. So here we have the supplementary procedures handy from our iPad. And when fuel quantities are balanced, that's where we are now. Fuel pump switches main tanks on. Center tank fuel pump switches on. And crossfeed selector close. Bright and extinguished. So that is what we have done up to this point, because we do have fuel in the center tank. Once we're at the point where there's no fuel in the center tank, crossfeed valve open again, fuel pump switches on the low tank off, and when quantities are balanced, fuel pump switches on. So we're going to have to monitor the fuel, because right now we're fine with balanced fuel, but as soon as the aux tank is depleted, we will have to resume observance again and keep the tanks in balance. So just another look at the center tank fuel. We've got 1,840 kilos in the center tank, and our fuel flows are at 2,180 pounds per hour. So we know that we're somewhere in the next 30 minutes approximately, we'll be involved in doing other types of balancing as required. In any case, this is important that you keep track of your fuel. And that's where the recall is really a great function to remember. We don't have fuel now on the annunciator panel. As you can see, we only have elect. Well, elect is there because of the fact that we do have a drive light on because the number 2 engine is shut down. But now that we are using center tank fuel, there is no longer a fuel message there. So this recall function of the Boeing 737 is excellent as built-in reminders. All you have to do is to remember to select it often to keep track of what's happening with the fuel. All right, so we will cancel it, and we are in the hold, as you can see. And really, as we are flying, we should be altering the heading bug to our present heading at all times. I'm very busy as one person on the flight deck and as your flight instructor. So just remember that we have to keep that heading bug aligned to the current heading, and we have to keep track of our speed. Right now, as I'm talking, we are exceeding the speed, and we should be actually coming back on the thrust lever so that we can slow down a little bit to come back to the flaps up speed. Otherwise, our radius of turn will be too great. So this is something that's so important in the when you are operating with an engine out. You have to manually reduce the thrust, which is what I'm doing now to get that speed back. So the trend arrow is indicating as such, and isn't it beautiful outside? The sun is coming up in Muscat as we are continuing with this flight. One of the wonderful parts of being a pilot, enjoying the sights. All right, let's get back to what we're doing at hand. We will select a power setting here that we think that will maintain our flaps up speed. And of course, at the same time, we are keeping the aircraft in trim. This turn slip indicator is aligned, and that is what we want. So power is adequate to maintain the flaps up speed, and we'll keep our eye on it. There we go. Good. Now, while we are discussing this and while we're in the holding pattern, we had a series of things we had to do. I'm going to freeze the airplane right now so that we can talk. When we had the engine failure, we did what was required. We flew the airplane according to the FCTM. We're just reviewing back a little bit from part one. So we flew the airplane. I was pilot flying, and I maintained altitude and trimmed the airplane as required. Rudder trim wise, we took up to close to whatever it was, 1.5 to 2 units of rudder trim, whatever it takes to keep the airplane flying. We're using the autopilot, and I didn't disengage the autopilot, but the auto throttles were disengaged. And that's part of the FCTM procedure to ensure that, and call for MCT. The pilot monitoring gave it to me, and I, as pilot flying, selected MCT. Then we went through the engine out selection on the CDU and found out that the altitude that we were at, level 200, was the drift down altitude. So we're fine. And the airspeed was 225 knots. So we maintained that till we got to the holding. Now in the holding, we're going to hold at flaps up speed. That is very close to the best holding speed. So you get the best holding speed from the holding page, and it should be there. All right, so we are in that situation now. So the next thing we did when we had the aircraft under control and we decided to return, we changed the destination back to Muscat, and then we called up the Moosuc arrival with the RNP runway 08 left. And as you saw in this video, we verified that in fact what we selected was correct. And the way you do it is on the plan page, and the plan selection, I should say, on the ND, and on the legs page, stepping through the way you saw me do it. So now we know, in fact, that we have the correct approach in, and we're fine. Now, we elected to hold because we have other things to do. Before we got to this point, backtracking a wee bit, once we had the airplane under control, we did the first non-normal checklist, which was the engine failure and shutdown checklist. We completed that. And if you can remember, for whatever reason, we couldn't get the APU started. All right, fine. So we only have one source of electrics right now, and that's the #1 generator. And on top of that, we have an engine shut down. So we are landing at the nearest suitable airport. That's why we are coming back to Muscat, where there's no traffic. Dubai, very heavy in traffic. So the decision made between my first officer and myself was to come back to Muscat, very convenient for an immediate priority landing on runway 08 left. So we did the one engine inoperative, I should say the engine failure shutdown checklist. We are balancing fuel, and we've got the supplementary procedure handy so that we're making sure we follow it. So, and that's what we see on the left-hand side of this page. Now, if we can just have a look at, there is the approach. One thing that we could do, and we will do that as part of the descent procedure, is to set the minimums. Well, let's just set them now, because and then we'll go through a proper descent procedure later, which will be actually dictated to us from the one engine one engine inoperative landing checklist. We'll do that checklist down to deferred items. Then we'll do the descent procedure, which is, remember, 9 items. Remember from my previous videos. So let's just go ahead and have, well, we've got the chart out here. 325 is a minimum, and we're going to add 50 feet for our company. Let's say SOPs have stated that, so 375. So we set the minimum 375, and we'll get back to that in the descent procedure portion of the one engine inoperative landing checklist. So we've got that to do, and so we'll actually get into that right now. We'll have a look at it. One thing we didn't mention, perhaps I mentioned it, is that we had an option to relight the engine according to the engine failure shutdown checklist. When we actually did the checklist, we saw that we had all the engine indications that were proper that would have allowed us to actually do an in-flight start. I waive that just for this particular exercise. We've done an in-flight start already in my videos, so please look at the in-flight start. And definitely we would have actually gone ahead and while we were proceeding back to Muscat, to definitely relight that engine. But for this exercise, I wanted us to look at one engine inoperative approach and one engine inoperative landing procedure. So we mustn't forget that in the sequence of what we're doing. So we're just coming up to the one engine inoperative landing checklist. We've got it on the left-hand side of the page. So at this particular point, we will end part 2. I want to keep these briefings to minimum, and we'll look forward to seeing you in part 3, where we actually get into the one engine inoperative landing checklist. Thanks for watching. My information is on the screen. We are looking at many of these briefings that are in my Google Drive package with PowerPoint support, Google Slides. If you want to subscribe to that package, please contact me via email. Then we'll set up a Zoom meeting and we'll get you squared away. Thanks for watching. See you in part 3.